Each week we have all sorts of doctors and philosophers and artists and scientists, and tonight is no different. We've got Dr. Brooke, Dr. Beth, and Dr. Marion at the beautiful Park James Hotel. So a round of applause for the Park James and Mr. Homan. We also want to do a quick shout out for our friends at Nicodex. So if you're looking to build a product or you need help with designing your product, that's NECODEX.com. These guys have done excellent work for our community. Check them out. We'll have their link in the show notes below. Well, without any further ado, let's go ahead and light this candle. Thank you, ladies, for joining us. Human, you want to get us kicked off here?
I do. I think it would be best if you each introduce yourselves. Give us like 30 seconds of your background, what your area of expertise is. Dr. Beth, let's start with you.
I'm Dr. Beth McDougall. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm Dr. Beth McDougall. I've been practicing for 26 years. I studied internal medicine, but I have been practicing integrative medicine from day one. Started in 1998 in San Francisco and had a 2-decade practice in downtown Mill Valley called Clear Center of Health. And then about 2 years ago, I moved it over to a new, much larger center called Jizen that I co-founded with 3 other co-founders, one of which is here, Erin Shea. Where is she? Back there.
Ooh, Erin.
And Jizen is a multidisciplinary center that is a biooptimization center. And we'll talk a lot about what we do at Jizen today.
My name is Dr. Maria Marion, and my journey into medicine started when I was skiing professionally and gathered a variety of injuries in my body, and then went on to chemical engineering and was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. And through my own personal journey through allopathic medicine, I realized I was coming up short as far as my own results and my own journey. So that led me to naturopathic medicine, and I became a naturopathic doctor about 7 years ago. I've been practicing since then, and I specialize in complex chronic illness. I like challenging puzzles that have been yet to solve. I also like longevity and wellness and balancing that out with just the overall prevention.
Hi, my name is Dr. Brooke, and I also started my journey 28 years ago as a massage therapist working in structural integration and bodywork. From there, I went to osteopathic school because I realized that I wanted to be able to offer my patients more than just being a therapist and to be able to answer questions and to give them advice that they were seeking from other medical professionals. From there, I went into physical medicine and rehabilitation at Indiana University. I worked with spinal cord patients, stroke patients, brain injury patients, and then found that functional medicine and musculoskeletal functional medicine, along with ultrasound for diagnostics and using regenerative therapies for my patients to help to treat multiple illnesses. I do consider medicine to be an art and not just a science. And so for me, there's a lot of focus on diagnosis and not just looking at symptoms and creating things based off of imaging studies, but taking full history into account, considering their repetitive activities through life, as well as what the injuries that they sustained while they were children, even down to birth injuries. And so really considering their whole life path and then utilizing that art to create unique diagnosis for each person and create treatment plans based on my own history and my own experiences.
All right. Thank you, guys. Let's keep the same order. Dr. Beth, let's start with you. Over the past year, 2024, what condition did you see yourself treating the most? Like what seemed to be coming up over and over again, and one or two, and how did you treat it?
I would say by far and away, the most common thing is people frustrated with their body composition. And oftentimes that's led to insulin resistance. Are you all familiar with what that is? And metabolic syndrome, which is kind of the sequelae of that, where like someone will have elevated cholesterol, sometimes high blood pressure, belly fat deposition, and then they have a harder time putting on muscle. So their body, their weight maybe is going up slightly, but it's really a shift in the percent of fat versus muscle. And so I have different strategies for evaluating why that is. And then thankfully, Jizen, we have a whole bunch of tools for really cracking the code for difficult cases, because there's a lot of people that feel like they're doing everything right with diet and exercise, and it's just stubborn. And no matter what they do, it's hard to budge. So what we end up doing is a pretty complete workup. We'll do blood work. where we're looking at, the kind of basic metabolic markers of insulin, glucose, hemoglobin A1C, cholesterol panel, inflammatory markers, even liver enzymes, because you can get liver inflammation when you have this situation. And then we'll do sometimes, when needed, like some functional blood assays where we'll put a catheter in someone's arm, draw from the catheter blood for insulin and glucose, and then give them a sugar solution to drink, and then check the blood at different time points to see how their body's handling that sugar load. Are they making enough insulin? Are they able to bring that sugar back down in a timely manner? And then we have a metabolic testing department, kind of a biometric testing department at Jizen, and that has been invaluable. We do body composition analysis, also resting metabolic rate. So that's where you're lying on a table when you're in a fasting state and you're breathing through a mask, and we're collecting your gases in your breath and looking at what kind of fuels you're burning while you're resting, basically how much fat you're burning at rest. And from that, we can begin to determine how many calories someone should really be eating and what ratios of macronutrients they need. And then we'll have someone do what's called a VO2 max test, where they're exerting themselves either on a treadmill or a bike, breathing oxygen through a mask, and breathing through a mask, and we're collecting their breath and looking at what fuel they're burning at different levels of exertion. So people will usually start at lower levels of exertion burning fat, then at some point they'll flip into carbohydrate burning, and then at extreme levels they'll flip into lactate burning. And it's really interesting to look at when they make those switches. And from all of that, as well as some wearables like Oura Ring, continuous glucose monitor, careful history about the diet, we're able to give good recommendations for what they should be eating and how they should be training. And then I find hormone balancing really invaluable to that, because, that most of our hormones influence our metabolic rate, not just our insulin levels, but also if we have enough of the anabolic steroids like testosterone and DHEA, or if we have too high of cortisol. When women go into menopause and their estrogen falls, then we start to see reduction in their ability to put on muscle. And you probably have heard that muscle mass and the quality of your muscle cells really is not only the currency for longevity, but is almost kind of collectively acts like an endocrine organ, so to speak, because it can sink glucose from your bloodstream and bring it into the muscle cells so it can be utilized as a fuel source. And so the more muscle mass you have and the healthier muscle cells are, the better you can begin to kind of control your blood sugar and therefore your metabolism, and you can start to kind of move the needle with this body composition.
Dr. Maria, same question.
Yeah, I would say in the past few years, I've seen a dramatic increase in a lot of complex health challenges, particularly long COVID, whether patients know that that's what they're experiencing or not, as well as vaccine injury and chronic Lyme disease. And sometimes people just come in with chronic fatigue, but they might also have really interesting symptoms like chronic hives that came out of nowhere, and or skin rashes or other types of autoimmune presentations. And so generally how I present these sorts of complex patients is to identify root underlying issues that are modifiable. For example, we can't change the fact that someone had a COVID vaccine and that may or may not have quote unquote injured them. We can't go back and take that away, but we can take down their overall toxic load. We can lower their pathogenic load. We can evaluate their environment, evaluate their gut health, and optimize their microbiome. And within all of those evaluations, I often find Lyme disease and chronic co-infections to play major roles with a lot of these patients, and really a strikingly large amount of patients with any chronic illness end up having Lyme, quite a large percentage. And so the way that I've been treating Lyme lately is with something called supportive oligonucleotide therapy. And I've specialized in Lyme for the better part of my career, using a lot of different tools. Generally, I would start with herbal medicines, transition when herbal medicines fell short towards more things like IV therapy, IV ozone. IV silver, hydrogen peroxide, various kinds of natural antimicrobial IVs, and what we would consider to be a higher level of intervention. But in many cases, patients would still not recover with those types of interventions. Some would even go out of the country towards hyperthermia type treatments and really still not get the results that they were looking for. And so I became certified in a therapy called supportive oligonucleotide therapy, which is a gene silencing technique. The technical term for it is antisense oligonucleotide therapy. And this type of medicine is not new. It was FDA approved for cytomegalovirus associated retinitis in, I believe, 1998. So it's been used for some time for for a variety of infections as well as cancer. They're using it for lowering Lp(a), I believe now. In any case, what we do is we draw the blood here, we send it to a lab in Greece. The lab then identifies the pathogen within the blood. They identify the genetic material, so that in and of itself is a confirmation that that infection is in fact in that person's bloodstream. So whereas a lot of the diagnostics that we use for Lyme and co-infections are immune-based or indirect tests, meaning they haven't quite confirmed that that infection is present, the process of ordering SOT then therefore confirms that it is. So we know we're on the right track. And they create a microstrand RNA that exactly matches one or more genes that that pathogen uses to metabolize or replicate. And then they create 500 million to 1 billion copies of that microRNA. They put it in a small vial and they send it back to us. We reconstitute it and infuse it in the patient. And that IV is then active, or those SOT molecules are then active for 6 months in the body, and therefore slowing down the replication and or metabolism of those pathogens. So it's not actually killing the bug, which is quite an inflammatory process. If you think about antibiotics or herbs or even ozone IVs, those things are directly killing pathogens, which tends to release a lot of toxins, which your liver and your lymph and your gut have to then deal with. This is basically just slowing down the replication and metabolism. So the population really just slowly decreases over the course of that 6 months.
All right, great. Thank you. And then Dr. Brooke.
Well, I actually find this to be kind of a difficult question because I could easily say that I treat a lot of joints. I treat musculoskeletal injuries. But I think that really what I consider with people is flow and the flow of the body, the way that blood flow moves, the way that nerve flow moves through the body. Repetitive activities happen from young children. I see children as young as 8 years old that are playing baseball and throwing the baseball too many times in a certain way, and then they create inflammation or damage to the tissue in their system. So I think between our work lives, sitting in front of the computer, the way we hold our spines, our posture, our inability to exercise enough, which happens for all of us that are living this hustle lifestyle right now, the pandemic, so many of us were in these small apartments with poor ergonomic setups. People are scrolling with their phones all the time and are having thumb issues and tendon issues. They're leaning forward, their necks are dropping, their posture is changing. And so we live in a world that's changing each and every day rapidly right now. And we're doing things differently than we used to do. So I'm seeing a lot of things in people's bodies that are as a result of a surgical outcome at times, maybe a surgery they didn't need, maybe a surgery they did need. Either way, it's changed the intricate fabrication of the body and the way that things work together, the way that the nerves flow through the area, the way things become compressed, the way the blood flows or blood does not flow into a certain area. And so we really have to think about the whole body, not just looking at, I have knee pain. Well, what's happening in your spine? You know, what's happening with the nerves that innervate that knee? How are you moving? How are you sitting at work? How are you driving your car? What kind of things are you wearing on your feet? There's so many things to consider when it comes to musculoskeletal care, and it affects every other part of our life because our mood is affected by our movement and function. Pain affects how we sleep at night. Sleep then affects our overall health. So each thing is intricately connected to the next thing, and we have to really consider back to what is the source of this. It's not as easy as looking at an x-ray and saying you've got knee arthritis. You know, it's like, why is that there?
One of the things I thought was kind of interesting is, while all three answers were clinical, the first two seem to be more focused on medicine as opposed to lifestyle, because like it's a bifurcated approach, like both are important. So when you're thinking about the different modalities or treatments or technologies that you bring into Jaizen, it almost feels like you're walking into the future. Like even the paint on the walls has like no free radicals. I think Aaron had shown me this really impressive stuff. Yeah, which is just insane. So like how is your team thinking about the right kinds of technologies to build into the workflow so it has the highest degree of efficacy for your clients?
I can speak first on mine just because I just came through that. But for me personally, I'm using diagnostic ultrasound. The great thing about ultrasound is that you can actually use it in real time. And so with an MRI, you lay in a big tube, right? You're laying there, they're basically taking a picture of you statically, but you're not usually hurting when you're laying still. When you're hurting is when you're moving. And so with ultrasound, I can use diagnosis and actually move the arm while I'm looking at the structure. Like, what's the structure doing when I pick the arm up? Oh, my arm hurts when it's like this, not when it's like this. So if we're moving through things and figuring out like, why is this bothering this person? I can't figure it out on the MRI. And so many physicians are just really relying on that static image rather than looking at dynamics. I'm also using extracorporeal shockwave therapy, which is acoustic wave therapy. It helps to heal non-union fractures in people's body. It's sound waves that we're using. I'm not putting a needle through the skin with that. I'm not cutting through the tissue. I'm not changing the fabric of the system. I'm actually bringing the body's own attention to healing an area. We're bringing the cells into the area. We're signaling the brain that there's an injury in that area, that it will pick up and then send the cellular messengers that need to go down and actually treat that. I'm utilizing the IVs. I'm utilizing the labs that we have. We're hormone balancing. It's all part of healing tissue. It's not just one thing. You have to have the multidisciplinary approach. We have kinesthetic work down in our physical therapy lab as well, where we look at the way people walk. How are you putting your foot on the ground? We're taking pictures before and after, how our treatments are actually encouraging and helping these people rather than just sending them off to do an arm bike or sit with ice on something in a physical therapy algorithm. Let's get out of the algorithms and into really treating people specifically, because the algorithms just aren't helping people. That's why they're showing up on our doorstep.
That's great. Did you want to answer that as well?
Well, I think you were saying like we're not really speaking about lifestyle, but I really want to emphasize how we are educating about lifestyle. You know, there's lifestyle science now. We know so much about how important sleep is and how important mindset is and meditation and doing energetic maintenance and going outside in the morning and putting your feet on the ground and letting light come in your eyes, and exercise is critical because muscle mass is so important. So how you train and then diet. I think diet is what people are most confused about, like this, because there's really no one diet that's right for everyone. And never is there one diet that's going to work for you your entire life. So it's really about helping people kind of adopt lifestyle practices that work for them. And so we do a lot of that. And then what I see is then Jizen and all that we have to offer we've been told we have the largest array of biooptimization technologies under one roof in the world. So it's a really cool center. I hope you can come take a look, and experience it. But the way we use the technologies are like to augment health and be kind of beyond, but you need that healthy lifestyle foundation really. And then, when someone has a medical problem, then we use the technologies like a prescription, along with supplements and maybe some intravenous therapies and things like that.
Can we go to the next question? Is that all right? Dr. Brooke, I want to talk about stem cells. And I want you to explain what stem cells are legal in the U.S. and what stem cells are legal outside of the U.S. and explain the difference. And then after that, Dr. Marie, I want you to tell us your journey with stem cells. All right, sure, Dr. Beth.
So for me personally, I really focus with the musculoskeletal system and what we can do there. Right now in the United States, the FDA has rules on what we can do and we cannot do. In the United States right now, we can only minimally manipulate cells. So if you come in for a visit with me, you cannot leave and let me manipulate the cells and take the cells that I want, take the stem cells out, and then put together the concoction that I want to put back into you. All that I can do right now in the United States is take your blood, take your bone marrow, take your fat cells. We do our best to optimize what cells we can get into those places that we want to treat you, but we can't actually manipulate like they can in other countries. You can go into other countries and people can literally jump over the border with a doctor from the United States, pay their money into that other country rather than us having the science here. We're not doing embryonic stem cells. That's not what we're trying to do. And I think a lot of people have it in their minds that this is embryonic stem cells, that this is fetal tissue, and that's not what we are attempting to do in the United States. We really need these laws to change. I think it's important with regard to cancer therapies, with musculoskeletal therapies, with regeneration, because if we could manipulate the cells from our own bodies, so this is your own bone marrow, your own blood cells, your own fat cells. If we could manipulate and take the best cells out of those areas and then utilize them to treat areas of injury, we would be having the regenerative properties that we need to really heal a lot of things that we can't do right now in the United States. So what we're doing now is a lot of platelet-rich plasma. So we take the plasma from the blood, we spin it down in a centrifuge like in science class, and then we take the best cells. We're using the best technology we can in our office with the kits that we're using. So we get as many cells as we can, and then platelets have integrins, they have growth factors, they have messenger RNA that basically moves through the blood and then brings signaling into the joints, to the tissues, into the spine to help to heal those areas. We also have exosomes, and exosomes are from umbilical cord at live births, at C-sections, and they are actually pre-screened donors, and they can take different parts of the umbilical cord, and those exosomes are derived from mesenchymal stem cells, and they also carry messenger RNA, they're carrying proteins, they're carrying growth factors through, and setting up a signaling system in the body so that we can bring our own cellular responses and our own stem cells to the area to treat the injuries.
Dr. Maria, would you mind sharing your health journey? Because I know you left the country to get stem cells.
Yes, no problem. About almost 2 years ago, I was in a bad skiing accident. I more or less shattered my tibia plateau and my tibia and fractured my fibula, and I had compartment syndrome. I have 18 screws and 2 metal plates in my tibia right now, and we're not sure about the trajectory, but I'm walking. I've got 2 legs and things are healing well, but I decided to go to a clinic in Tijuana to do stem cell therapy, to try to just throw every single regenerative thing I can possibly throw at this leg. While I was there, because I do have a number of injuries from my history as a professional skier, the type of skiing I was doing was throwing myself off of 40-foot cliffs, 70-foot road gaps, 80-foot park jumps, really silly skiing. So I've collected a lot of degeneration in my joints over the years. I've been having severe cervical spine pain on and off for years. And at the time that I was going down to treat my leg, the cervical spine pain was quite bad. So they did some imaging on my cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar spine, my leg. There's a lot of metal in my leg, so that was a CT. Everything else was an MRI. I had one mildly herniated disc in my cervical spine and 2 in my thoracic spine, 1 in my lumbar spine. So I treated all the facets more or less in my cervical spine, and the 1 disc in my C-spine, 2 in my thoracic spine, and then a bunch in the leg. And
well, how are you? Like, what's happening? Like, what can you do that you couldn't do right now?
Surprisingly, my cervical spine, can't say this, cervical spine pain went away within 48 hours. It was a miracle. Part of my decision to go down there was that this particular center uses single source derived stem cells that they've been proliferating out for many years. So you're getting the exact same genetic cell line that every single other patient that goes to that center gets. So I don't know if it's public knowledge, but Mike Tyson and other UFC fighters and numerous other athletes go to this particular center, many of whom are quite damaged, especially with the UFC. These fighters are professionally beating themselves up. And so you know what you're getting. It's not a hodgepodge of multiple genetic sources. And they're also hypoxically proliferated out. So they're used to a low oxygen environment, which means when you inject them into the joint, they're already sort of used to the lower oxygen environment. So my guess, and I would defer to really Dr. Brooke on this, but my guess is that I might have achieved the same results that I could have here, but with multiple sessions here. Maybe it would have taken 3, 4, something like that in one session is my guess.
Yeah, I think that this is a good question, and I think it differs for so many different people. I actually have worked with a doctor for a very long time who does intradiscal injections of platelets, of bone marrow aspirate, of exosomes, and it's a very varied response that people get. Some people get great results, some people get no results from these things, and I would actually, Human might be able to speak to this a bit. But one of the things for me personally is that biomechanics are primary in any situation like this. Once things are not getting good nerve or blood flow, they are not at full function. And so the key to me is to make sure the biomechanics are actually adjusted within someone, or else degeneration will continue to occur. So until the actual change and shift of the fabric, that the blood flow and the nerve flow is coming through, we can keep injecting, but they're going to need more injections. And they're going to need more injections and more injections and more injections until the biomechanics are fixed. It's my personal opinion. I've seen it for years. And there's several different ways that this can happen. It can happen through body work, objective, different ways. But I think that this is a real careful thing to speak to, because I know people who have had great results in 48 hours, and I've had people say they got 0 results. Okay. So this is a very complicated question, in my personal opinion.
Right, right. Well, we'll talk about my journey later. Let's talk about, because you did bring it up, let's talk about vaccine injuries. Hopefully no one's triggered. The New York Times wrote an article 4 months ago, and it said no one cares about my vaccine injury. And it was a big article. It was 3 or 4 pages long, and you had all these studies, you had all these cases. Are people coming into your clinic with an autoimmune disease that had been dormant for so many years? All of a sudden they take a booster and this thing is alive and kicking and destroying their lives. Can you talk about that? And can you also talk about how you're addressing vaccine injuries?
Yeah, we've seen a lot of that. And luckily less and less now, unless it's been chronic ever since people got so many vaccines. But yes, I was pretty much every day contending with really crazy stories, because it was manifesting uniquely for each individual. Tended to kind of highlight your weak area. You know, if someone had a dormant autoimmune disease, it could flare it back up. It caused autoimmune diseases, it seemed, out of nowhere. And then it was really common to have people come in with like just inflammation everywhere, really high inflammatory markers, lots of body pain, brain fog, fatigue, being in bed. And so what I found in the early days was it often triggered the reactivation of other dormant viruses in the body. So a lot of times the stress of that vaccine injury would trigger a reactivation of Epstein-Barr virus or human herpes virus 6 or cytomegalovirus. And so a lot of the inflammation was coming from that. And then they would have these kind of antibody spike protein complexes that were potentially kind of activating the clotting cascade in the body. And so there would be a lot more of like microfibrin deposition and clots, and people were having problems related to that. So I found it was helpful to treat reactivated viruses, put people on proteolytic enzymes to kind of like break up the fibrin in the bloodstream, kind of clean up the vasculature a little bit, and then also balance the hormones, because a lot of times the stress would take its toll on the adrenal glands, and then the adrenal hormones would go down. And so if you replenish those, then they would have less inflammation. And then we found this absolutely game-changing procedure that we brought into Jizen, which was called EBO2. And what it is we put a catheter in both arms. We run the blood through a dialysis filter, and then the blood is ozonated, oxygenated, and exposed to light wavelengths, and then it's routed back in the other arm. And that process can really pull out a lot of inflammation in the body and a lot of these microclots and kind of, spike protein antibody complexes and just inflammatory markers. And so that was a game changer for a lot of people, as well, not just vaccine injury, but long COVID as well. They almost have very similar presentations, and then also for other things. So we really kind of developed a way to help people.
So we know that the audience has some great questions here. So Arnie, maybe do you want to get the box going? And while he flips this around, maybe the panel could kick us off with the answer on mitochondria function. Like we know this is kind of like
So the way this works, we can throw it around. You catch it.
All right, listen, if this thing gets too much feedback, we're just going to go to the traditional mic, all right?
the box. But the box is the box.
Let's talk about maybe.
So we throw this box around. Yeah.
All right. Who's got the first question?
All right, does anyone have a question, a medical question? Because if not, we've got 20 other questions. You can ask anything can you turn that down? Does anyone have a question? All right, let's start here.
Okay, this might be hard, but without being political at all, because that's not where we're going here. But we have a changing administration, and you mentioned the legality of some of the things that you would like to do versus what you are allowed to do now. Do you think that we may see a change in some of those things with the next administration? And what would those changes include?
My feeling is yes. Yes, I think we will. I think Bobby Kennedy is really interested in broadening the toolbox again. And when I started in practice in 1998, my toolbox was much broader, and especially in the intravenous ingredients and mostly in that realm. So systematically every year, things are being taken away, and so there's fewer and fewer IV ingredients I have nowadays. And then it was absolutely a travesty when peptides were many of them were taken off the market, and then because we just get phenomenal results from the peptides, and they're so incredibly safe. I've never seen bad things happen.
Can you explain like a couple peptides, what they are and what they did, and what you were allowed to use and what you can't use, just real briefly?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, there's BPC 157, which stands for body protection compound, and it just speeds soft tissue healing, and injury healing. It's really good for people who work out a lot and get sore after a workout, and, can kind of like hasten their ability to get back in the gym and work out again. We love working with peptides that improve growth hormone secretion in the brain. So there's secretagogues that will it's very different than taking growth hormone itself, where you can end up with supraphysiological levels of growth hormone. This instead just improves the brain's ability to make growth hormone. So it's more of optimizing the brain's production of growth hormone, but it still has its normal kind of checks and balances in the body. Pathways that can kind of like tone it down. And there's peptides for brain health. There's peptides to improve mitochondrial function. So there's peptides to help with fat burning and weight loss and, that sort of thing. So yeah, there were a few that were unavailable for a bit and, have slowly come back online. And so I think part of it is, going to change nationally, but we really have trouble in California at the state level. So California is one of the hardest states in the country, maybe like second worst in terms of being able to get things here and do things that we should be able to do that other doctors can do in other states. So I feel like we have a lot of work to do in California.
Do you think Bobby's going to make America healthy again?
I do. I actually do. He's a friend of mine. He's a very healthy guy. He's been taking great care of himself forever, and he knows what it takes, and it's just so disgusting that, this kind of corporate infiltration into our regulatory bodies, into the FDA and the EPA and the NIH and the, USDA and all of that. They're just infiltrated with corporate interests. And so they're not really there to protect us. They're there to protect the financial bottom line of these corporations. So we've got to take that out and just rebuild these organizations.
Great. Let's keep the energy going. Arnie, can you make that pass all the way over here? Hey,
we're doing it.
I talk into it. Oh. Would some of those peptides for the brain actually help in either treating or alleviating the symptoms of Alzheimer's?
Well, I think they help, but that's just icing on the cake. There's so much that can be done for Alzheimer's, I think, and for other neurodegenerative cognitive decline situations, because usually there is something causing inflammation. So usually there's an infection, whether it's a dental cavitary lesion or periodontal disease or sinus colonization with mold or bacteria, or some systemic infection with Lyme or reactivated viruses or a microbiome balance in the gut. There's usually some kind of inciter of inflammation. And then there's often a toxic burden. So sometimes toxins in and of themselves can generate the inflammation. Sometimes it's synergistic, but a lot of times there's like heavy metal elevation or petroleum solvents or, just industrial toxicants of many varieties. And I do a lot of neurodegenerative disease and cognitive decline. That's what, I was going to say, my second thing I see probably more than anything is cognitive decline. But the great news is not a death sentence nowadays. That we can do so much about it. And someone was mentioning at the beginning of this TB006. This is a really exciting compound because there's we have immune systems surrounding the gut. Well, we also have immune systems surrounding our neurons, and these immune cells will release something called galactin-3. And what this substance is this monoclonal antibody that will bind to this inflammatory marker and cut inflammation in the brain. So the data looks really good on this compound. And I think, to me, you would want to simultaneously figure out what's causing the inflammation. Is it the infection? Is it toxins? And then there's a hormone piece too. We know women, for example, are much more prone to developing Alzheimer's when their estrogen falls, and cognitive decline. So the steroid hormones, testosterone, and estrogen and DHEA and pregnenolone for women are incredibly important. For men, testosterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, incredibly important. And, there's good data on that. Like low DHEA is bad for the brain, so you want to try to replenish those. You want to make sure that the gut is in good shape. And when you do all those things, then you can bring in this monoclonal antibody and then the peptides. The peptides are really helpful, but they're not going to do it on their own. And then Cindy will be speaking later, I think next month or something, but Cindy is a neuroscientist that works in our office, and our synergistic work together changes lives, because sometimes people will be mistakenly diagnosed with Alzheimer's, for example. They'll come in saying, I've been diagnosed, and then it turns out they have had repeated head traumas, and some of which are very long-standing, they don't even remember. And we'll be able to diagnose that with a 19-channel EEG brain map. And then we have really good protocols for kind of healing the low voltage areas of the brain. And as we do that, then it's like the brain just kind of comes back online. And it's so cool.
Let's talk to Leslie here.
First, no box over here. We don't need the box. You guys are brilliant. I've almost understood all the words, but hypothetically, if there was a woman in her mid-50s, late, and she hasn't exercised since COVID, okay, and then may or may not be in menopause, you said something about the muscles not able to kind of be able to build muscle again. My muscle memory, I used to be able to work out and then I'm bam, and now my muscle memory has Alzheimer's. And so is there a way should I just give up now? I mean, or what can I do to get that back?
You're asking
around?
For a friend.
It's hypothetical.
Yeah. So we do, again, a lot of hormone optimization. So we would start with looking at where your hormones are now. And granted, not you, hypothetically, somebody in their 50s, postmenopausally will have very little estradiol, most likely. And so starting to replace some of these hormones can go a long way in building muscle, particularly testosterone in women. We actually have molecularly more testosterone than we do estrogen, and it's responsible for building and maintaining lean muscle mass, for burning fat. It's also highly critical for brain health, bone health, and heart health. And so just getting a woman's or man's hormones balanced goes a long way to starting the road towards optimized health. Of course, we're talking about diet and sleep and exercise. The hormones are going to be out of whack whether you're menopausal or not if you're not sleeping and not exercising and not eating well. So those things are super foundational. And as I was going to mention in the question previously, a lot of my patients are like career patients. By the time that they see me, they've seen 3 naturopaths and 6 other providers. So they are eating and sleeping and meditating like saints, and they're still sick. And so that's why Jaizen, I think, is a really beautiful center, because we have access to the higher levels of intervention that those patients need. And it's almost insulting if I start to tell a patient to start to eat and sleep better when they've been going through chronic illness for 10 years and have seen nutritionists and naturopathic doctors and functional and just on, and they're eating immaculately and sleeping immaculately, and they're still sick. And so we do need those higher levels of intervention, the molecular medicine approaches that we have at Jaizen, like IV ozone, EBO2, SOT, methylene blue, red light, and on. And we're so lucky to have access to those.
Anyone else? All right.
Thank you, Human. Hello, ladies. I'm Tanya Long. It's not up to you to fix the healthcare issue we have in this country. But I sit here and I'm like, I need some of that. Oh, I've got to have her for this. And she can fix that. And then it goes cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. You can help dramatically 90% of the people in this room, but a much smaller fraction will actually come out of pocket to pay it. My question to you then is, how do you counsel patients that you know you can help, but they just don't have FANG money? Do you know what that means? They don't have FANG money. I'm in tech. To just come out of pocket to be well. What's your solution?
I was actually going to speak to that when she spoke about the problems with the healthcare and what we can and can't do. And I think one of the biggest problems we have right now is access to care. I think that right now we are being run by the insurance companies, and the answers are pharmaceuticals, the answers are algorithms, and we really need to change the outlook of the physicians that are treating this country right now. If each of us gave just 20% of our time, we could probably treat everyone. And so for me personally, I do work on sliding scales sometimes, and I do give people a little extra time sometimes. And what we're basically doing is creating a multidisciplinary approach. There are so many things that you can do in nature. There's so many things that you can get out to do to strengthen your system, to get out and breathe, to be part of our natural world. And sometimes we get so focused on the science and the intricacies of what we can afford and what we can't afford that we forget that some things are really simple. And so, our insurance companies actually do cover hormone replacement. It's not all compounded hormones. And so there are ways for us to get the word out there that these are kind of the building blocks to get started with this. And then once people start to improve, perhaps they can work a bit more. Perhaps they can get out and exercise more. They can sleep better. Then they're able to become more productive in their life, and then they're able to afford more. And so I think as physicians, as a whole, we all need to be talking to one another and coming out with solutions to be able to make access of care to everyone. It's not fair that some people can afford things and some people can't, but it goes back to the system, and it goes back to the way that it's built right now and the algorithms that are there and the things that they'll allow us to do and won't allow us to do. We need to break away. And if we all stopped paying for insurance, I put out so much money for insurance every year. I never hit a deductible. I hardly ever spend the money from it, and then they won't pay for anything. So why are we continuing to pay for it? Let's all get catastrophic plans and move out. But we as a people have to stand up.
Yeah,
in a lot of different ways.
We need a whole new system. Like I always feel like Western medicine is really good when there's an emergency. It's like great when someone needs a surgery or something's advanced to the point where you need a really serious intervention. But what Western medicine is not cut out to do is to teach people how to be healthy and to stay healthy, or to reverse the trajectory of chronic disease, which is largely based on lifestyle and the choices that we make. So I really feel like we need 2 parallel systems. So we need a system of of lifestyle education and kind of putting the power back into people's hands, showing them that they can, through wearables and tuning into how they feel and really kind of developing a better relationship with themselves, really ascertain, like, are the choices that they're making working for them or not, and what can they do to help themselves feel better. So I think that is what is going to come. And that doesn't cost that much. It's education. It can be done in mass sometimes, like with programs that someone can download. And I'm actually going to DC on Friday to actually talk about this. So, yeah.
I have a medical question because it comes up all the time, and maybe you can answer this in really plain English that everyone can understand. What's the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and why is type 1 diabetes so much more difficult to treat than type 2? All right.
Well, type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease where there's an immune reaction to the beta cells in the pancreas that secrete insulin. So sometimes it's like the damage is done, and so it's not reversible by the time it's diagnosed at this point. So then the person has to be on insulin. There's still a lot that can be done, though, with lifestyle education and even a lifestyle that cultivates insulin receptor sensitivity, so that not as much insulin is required to control the blood sugar. So there's a lot that still can be done, and other hormone balancing plays a role with your blood sugar regulation and should be done, particularly in someone with an autoimmune process. The difference between the type 1, which is often juvenile onset, not always, but most often, and type 2 is it's an insulin resistance disease. So basically, when you eat a meal, your blood sugar goes up, your pancreas releases insulin to bring that blood sugar back down. And insulin works by binding to a receptor on your cell membrane. And through through a few steps, that affects a change where a door opens and sugar leaves your bloodstream and goes into the cell where it can serve as an energy substrate. So what happens it used to be 1/3 of the population, now it's over half of the population, and those numbers are growing, is that with time, the insulin doesn't fit as well in the lock and doesn't open that door as well. So the receptor becomes resistant to insulin, and it ends up taking more and more insulin to control the blood sugar. So that's type 2 diabetes. So eventually, all of the insulin that your body can possibly make is not enough to control the blood sugar, and you develop diabetes.
So I just looked this up on ChatGPT to explain, like, I'm 5, because it sounds like there are some questions over here. So here's what
is when your body has trouble using sugar, like the kind in candy or fruit for energy. Normally, a helper called insulin tells your body what to do with the sugar. But in diabetes, your body either doesn't have enough insulin or the insulin doesn't work right. It's like having a key that doesn't fit the lock. So the sugar stays in your blood.
Hey, kind of get that right, Dr. Beth?
Get it right? Yeah. But I mean, so basically the good news about type 2 diabetes is this is reversible. And with as few as 6 weeks of changing your diet and lifestyle, you can make a huge dent in it oftentimes. So you can often rekindle the insulin receptor sensitivity, so it requires less and less insulin to control the blood sugar, which is really important. I know you have to go, but because too much insulin floating around causes high cholesterol, high blood pressure, belly fat deposition, and increases your risk for cognitive decline and heart disease and cancer and autoimmunity. So it's a really important thing to correct.
Danielle.
Yeah. So I wrote a letter recently that I haven't sent to you guys yet. It's kind of a love letter, but I'm just going to read it. I might cry, but dear Team Jizen, to all of you in the room, they're an awful lot. I wanted to write to express my deepest gratitude and share my story thus far. A story that, thanks to all of you, has taken a huge turn for the better. I'm a small business owner in San Francisco, and I spent a lifetime battling Lyme and lupus. My journey through the traditional healthcare system has been both eye-opening and deeply personal. For years, I lived with ugly rashes, horrible, painful throat ulcers, fevers, migraines, real brain fog, fatigue, seizures, grand mal seizures, and chronic lung congestion, meaning I couldn't even get a full breath. These were not just physical challenges, they were barriers to fully living, compounded by the daily demands of running a business solely. At California Pacific Medical Center in San Francisco, keyword California, I often left there feeling more hopeless than when I arrived. Temporary fixtures and medications made me feel worse, and my countless ER visits left me unfairly labeled in their records as a hypochondriac. But then I found Jizen. For my very first appointment with Dr. Marion, she gave me something I've never experienced before: time, care, and genuine commitment. In 2 hours, she began piecing together the puzzle of my health in a way no one else has ever done. Within a month, I was fully properly diagnosed. On November 11th, 11/11/24, I started SOT therapy. And for the first time, I can breathe fully again, literally and figuratively. It works. It really works. My experience has transformed my understanding of what wellness truly means. Thank God for where health and technology meet at the corner of 100 Shoreline in Mill Valley.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. What a testimonial. We have time for one more question. Who's going to take us out with a real zinger? All right.
All right. So it's been great hearing all of you, and it's been very insightful, although sometimes I think I might need a medical degree, but it's okay. But I wanted to know, there hasn't been any discussion around alcohol. I'm curious how you involve. Now, by the way, I'm not an alcoholic. Neither is my friend. But we just wanted to know about your views on alcohol and your insight and intervention in that area. Not to go into it a whole lot, but just that I haven't heard that yet. So I was just curious.
Alcohol is poison. It's most definitely a poison. I think it's a mainstay in our culture. I don't necessarily personally stigmatize or criminalize, I don't know what the word is, overly dramatize its toxic effects. But as with everything, moderation is wise. What I have found for people that do struggle with alcohol cravings actually are the GLP-1 agonists. Really help to reduce overall alcohol cravings. Can take someone from, just wanting a glass of wine at night, which isn't necessarily that much, but if it becomes 3 nights a week, 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, and that's your main source of relaxation, it becomes pretty ingrained in your brain that that's going to help you wind down at night. And actually the GLP-1 agonists have been very effective at reducing some of that alcohol craving. But ultimately, it is a poison. It's processed in the liver before anything else is. And so if you're trying to lose weight, you're going to be processing that alcohol before you burn the glucose, before you burn fat. So it can really set weight loss goals back. It's inflammatory to the brain. It's a really significant risk factor for cognitive decline and Alzheimer's. Pokes holes in the gut, causes leaky gut. It's going to be leading to more systemic inflammation because of that. And so personally, I try to limit it very significantly. It gets tough around the holidays, but I don't personally abstain entirely from it. I'm sure everyone has their own approach.
Can I just say we have mocktails tonight, everybody. You're still thirsty and
made with Java.
Yeah,
they're delicious and nutritious. Yeah.
Did you want to say anything else, Dr. Brooke, or are we good? Because Nick's going to ask the final question.
Well, thank you, ladies, for a very insightful talk tonight. So, a round of applause for the speakers. Yeah, and we always want to be valuable to our guests. So, how can the zombie community, including those folks tuning in at home, be helpful to what you're building?
Spread the word and come visit us. Yeah.
So tell everyone where you're located and everything you offer within
your
Jisen.
website.
Yes, you can definitely follow us on social and then come to the website, jisen.com. And then we're located in Mill Valley. It's a 30,000 square foot facility. We have integrative medicine, neuroscience, integrative bodywork department, a full biooptimization suite with, like I said, largest array of technologies in the planet under one roof. So we have red light, near infrared light beds. We have infrared ozone saunas, walk-in cryotherapy units. We have adaptive performance equipment like the Vasper bike. We have a full biometrics testing department, intravenous department, laboratory, apothecary. I'm sure I'm forgetting a lot, but, and a whole host of just incredible specialists. Like, I think you can tell, the level here of these rock stars. That's everybody at Jisen. Every specialist is just top of their game, like the absolute best. We would rather not practice at all unless they could be in this kind of holistic think tank environment, which is so progressive and where they can do really the work that they want to do. So it's so cool.
And Jisen spelled Jyzen, everyone. Jyzen.
Just real quick, I just would like to say that
idea
for everybody here, we vote with our dollars. We get out and we buy the things that we want to buy, and we need to be smart with where we're spending our money. And I think that these big corporations and some of these places that we're putting our finances, we want to see change, then it has to come from starting with us. And so really thinking about those things as you go through the day-to-day of what you're deciding to do and how you're deciding to live your lifestyle. Convenience is great, but it leads to destruction. And so really finding those different places in your life that you can make even small shifts to support local things, local businesses, really getting back to the basics and reeling it in a bit for ourselves.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
I would just say I agree wholeheartedly with both of these doctors, but becoming your own pillars of health in your community can be really inspiring, talking about your health challenges, what works for you, and being open about that and helping lead others to more functional, quote unquote, alternative, but really holistic medical approaches can go a long way in really uplifting the health of our entire civilization.
Beautiful. Well, thank you, doctors, again for a wonderful evening. And want to do another quick shout out to our friends at Java Tea and the Codex, and again, of course, the Park James. And for more of the most delicious brains, be sure to tune in at siliconzombies.com. And also February 4th is our next one. So next time, until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.